What's up, guys? This is going to be the final picks for UFC on ESPN Plus 21, Kattar versus Zabit, coming up tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. for the main card. That should put the prelims at about 8 a.m. So another early one, guys. Really good co-main and main event here, especially for the time slot, these fights are on. A lot of times they'll water down the card. There is, a lot of name fighters, especially for the hardcore fans on this fight or on this card. So it should be pretty good. I want to say right off the hop, guys, this is probably going to be the longest, most informative, most coverage that I've done in a video. There's a ton of fights this weekend. 40 fights, I think, we're up to bet on. Combate, KSW, Bellator, all the promotions, even one championship. Now, the thing with one is they don't put those up until right before the fight, so I wasn't able to get a video out on those just because they were only up for a few hours. And there was actually a couple decent ones on there, but tons of fights still up here, guys. 40, like I said. So what I'm going to do is we'll run through the UFC like I have in past. We'll run through from the main event down the card, any names that stand out and the leans and things like that. And then right after that, if there's enough time, I'll get straight into KSW, Combate, and Bellator. If not, if this video is running a little bit long, what I'll do is I'll put out another video following this one with those three events. But of course, I won't go through every fight on those cards. I'll just talk about the names that stand out for each. And then you guys can, decide whether you want to do, parlays across all the cards or just do them individually. That's really up to you. The few times a year when there are this many cards, what I will ask is that you either take, notes on your phone, write it down, whatever. And the names that I do give out for the parlays, you can write them all down, and hopefully you have an idea of who you like with the names that I give, because obviously we're not going to be running 5 to 10 fight parlays. So I won't be giving out a ton of different ways that you can place the fighters, but I will give out all the names that are going to be good options to put in parlays. So at that point, if you want to do a little bit of research, I highly recommend Tapology, guys, just to get an idea of the fighters, their backgrounds, their gyms. Now, never base your pick solely off of that, but Tapology is a good source just to get an idea of the fighter's experience, the size, reach, the matchup, tailor the tape type of stuff, right? Then, watching a fight from each, it can take at the most half hour of your time to make some money. It's not a big deal, right? It's actually a good investment of your time. Now, I'm saving you a lot by going into these cards, right? It can be overwhelming, like I mentioned earlier in the week with all these fights. I will go in and I'm going to pull out all the names that stand out to me. And then that way, you guys can just look through, the good value picks and choose from that instead of having to go and see, like I said, fucking 40 fights up and have to sift through it all, right? So that's why I say write it down. That way you have all the names in front of you and you can kind of look at what you feel might be the best fighters to put together for some really good parlays, because there are a lot of options here, guys. Feel free to ask me, if I like the parlay once you do put them together. It's all good, but there's so many different options. I didn't want to, preset a bunch of parlays. So let's get straight into it. I'll start at the main event. Like I said, we got Zabit versus Calvin Kattar. I do think this is a really good fight, really good matchup. Calvin Kattar's got some really nice boxing, more traditional style, whereas Zabit's more flashy, right? A lot of hype on Zabit. He's going to be fighting at home. The one thing that I do feel comes into play that a lot of people aren't thinking about in this fight is the fact that they're in Russia and a decision can come into play, especially with it being, well, it says 3 5-minute rounds here. So they're not doing the traditional 5-round main event, and that is a major factor, guys, because Zabit can kind of hit the gas a lot harder. That said, a robbery is also possible. Right, I'm going to be really nervous on all these fights when they go to the judges' scorecards for the guy that's not fighting at home. So that's Kattar in this case. Now, hopefully he doesn't, he gets rid of him before we get to the judges' scorecards and takes him out. But, Zabit's pretty tough, so I wouldn't put it past him for this to go to a decision. That said, 2.0 would be accurate for me. So even if Calvin Kattar was a dog, say even 2.2, I wouldn't touch it. But bookies have clearly made a mistake putting him up over 3.0. So that's why we're taking advantage of it, guys, or that's why I am, right? It's a clear example of why, or a bet that I've made strictly based off the odds being off. I have a lot more respect than 3.2 or whatever he was at for Kattar. So I did pull the trigger on that. And I did talk about it in the last video. So we'll just move on to the co-main event. And that's Alexander Volkov against Greg, the Inhaler King Hardy. Now, here's the thing with this fight. All the advantages go to Alexander Volkov. 37 fights. He's pretty much seen it all. He's been training in striking, grappling, clinch work, all the aspects of MMA for a long time, far longer than Greg Hardy. The thing is, Greg Hardy's got the power in a heavyweight fight that can make, all the difference. And to be honest, watching the weigh-ins, you see that blockhead Alexander Volkov has, man, and it just looks like a huge target. I mean, if you haven't seen the weigh-ins, just go check him out and tell me that he just doesn't look like, a big target to be KO'd. Now, that said, it stands out in my head that Lewis, with the last 10 seconds, after being outclassed that whole fight, Derek Lewis, that is, right before the Balls is Hot interview that made him famous, he KO'd Alexander Volkov in the last 10 seconds after he had been outclassed, like I said, the entire fight. So that stands out huge to me, and I feel like if Greg Hardy was able to connect, he could put him away. So with that in mind, there's no value for me here, guys. I do feel like 3-1 is warranted. I do feel like he's that much better than Hardy, but getting hit on the chin would be the end. So no value on Volkov, even though he's that much better, and no value on Hardy because he's warranted at 3-1. Next up, Zalim Emadeev, Danny Roberts. This is kind of interesting, guys. I was watching tape on Zalim, and it reminded me of his last fight, and he got really frustrated. It was an entertaining fight, but he got really frustrated, and even after the fight, he didn't want to shake hands. And I do see that anger here. When he's in the stare downs with Roberts, it feels like Roberts is playing off it. And with him at 2.7, it does seem like a little bit, seems off to me. Now, it's one of those things. Roberts has the experience in his favor. He does have some UFC fights, and Emadeev, can let his emotions get the better of him. So there are some factors in this fight that can help Roberts. But again, this has decision on it, and I don't really trust it. This seems like a sweat bet to me. There is a little bit of value in Roberts if you, really like him, studied tape, and thought, okay, this is a good bet. I'm not mad at that. It's just if we're going to be strict about it, for me personally, I do know what I'm getting with Roberts, but I would have liked to maybe watch 3 or 4 fights from each, which I didn't do with the amount of fights that are on this weekend, guys. I'm going to be honest. But that said, I do think it's slightly off, so I wouldn't be mad if you did take a shot. Ed Herman, Caddis, I'm not even going to butcher his last name, is now. I was hoping that Ed Herman would get or become a huge dog here and people would bet up Caddis. That hasn't really happened. The odds are accurate in my opinion. Not really a fight I'm super excited for. Ed Herman's been around forever. One of the original seasons of The Ultimate Fighter. Tough guy. Hasn't really been, KO'd brutally too many times. So for those guys that have been around forever, like the Diegos, Ed Hermans, and, the old school fighters that are still kicking, he's one of the more durable ones. Now, 9 fights for Caddis, so that does speak to the experience. But either way here, I wouldn't be surprised. It's pretty close to a pick'em, accurate odds. I'd like to see Herman pull out a W. If he got up to 2.75, I'd take a shot on him, or 3-1, but not at 2-1. So I'm gonna pass on that one, guys. Anthony Rocco Martin, Ramazan Ameev. Rocco Martin I was pretty high on before his Damian Maia fight. Now, that didn't make me think any less of him. If you look at Damian Maia, a good example would be Lyman Good. We saw what Lyman Good did to Chance Rencounter. He's a beast. He was a beast in Bellator. He's a really good fighter, and we saw what Damian Maia did to him. Took him out in the first round and made it look easy, right? So Anthony Martin did go to decision and lose to Damian Maia. I believe it was a decision. And there's no shame in that. It's actually good experience to be in there with a grappler like that. Martin does have a good ground game. Now, I don't want to spend the whole time here us talking about Anthony because, Ramazan is no joke. I was watching tape on him as well. Power in the hands, good striking. Might have a striking advantage over Martin. This fight is, pretty close fight in my opinion. Rocco Martin up at 2.45 is a good bet in my opinion. I don't know where he's sitting right now. But at pick'em odds, it's not a good bet. It's accurate. But if you see Rocco become a decent dog closer to fight time, I'd pull the trigger on that, guys. Gamzatov against Klidson Abro. This is another one I thought was off just with Klidson being close to a 3-1. Shamil did look a lot bigger at the weigh-ins. I do think a lot of people with him being at home, 13-0, you could see the odds even improve more. If Klidson gets up over a 3-1, I might take a shot on that. As it is right now, it's pretty accurate. Again, Russia does play a factor into all these ones. It could go to the decision for me, guys. I'm just being honest. I don't want to see anybody get robbed, and not expect it to come, because there could be multiple robberies on this card. It's going to be a good tell after the first few fights, if they go to decision, how the judges are scoring these fights. One thing I will say that is a positive is there is a decent amount of fights in Russia. So the judges over there probably have seen some fights, kind of, should know what they're looking at. So a little bit of reassurance there. It's just, are they going to want to rob the guys coming from the States or other countries and, lean towards the hometown fighter? Because as you can see here, there's a Russian fighter in almost every fight. Next up, we got, this one is one that's off, guys. Another example of, the odds makers getting it wrong. Dalcha Ligumbula, I'm not even going to butcher that, but Magomed Ankalev. No doubt, Magomed's probably more technical. Dalcha is wild. He looks sloppy sometimes. If you watch tape on him, he definitely does have a little bit of a sloppy vibe to him when you watch him fight. A lot of wild power. But, if he connects, it's going to be over quick. He does have judo, so he has some grappling. He can, he has some good throws. If you watch tape, he has some takedowns, so he's not, a fish out of water when it comes to grappling. So that's good. He looks super strong. It does look like he's on steroids, right? Not going to lie. If you watch the weigh-ins, it looks like USADA's coming for him ASAP. But a lot of power coming off a knockout. To put him at 4-1 to me is crazy, right? Even though there is a bit of a technical difference there as far as those type of skills go. But when we're in a cage here, guys, a lot of times people need to remember you can't always just go on technical skill, right? It is for sure a good base and a very important factor, but guys that go for it and pressure and power in the hands and determination and all those things are definitely a factor as well, right? So we'll see how it goes. Don't be surprised to see, Dalcha come out winging it and looking sloppy, but at 4-1, those are wrong. I'd say 2.5 would be accurate at the most. At 4, you have a 1.5 advantage on the bookie, in my opinion. I don't know if he's going to stay at 4-1. I'm going to take a small shot at 4-1. So yeah, that's that fight. One of the most, disrespectful lines as far as the bookies getting it wrong, in my opinion. Rustam Kabalov and Sergey Kondratko. I saw Sergey, or watched some tape on him previous to his last fight, which was his UFC debut. He's dangerous on the feet. I feel like Rustam's gonna, he might want to lock him up on the cage, do some grappling here. With Rustam and Akbar Nurmagomedov, those two were going to be parlay options. Their lines have been beat up so bad. So the fact that they're not straight bets, that's for sure. So those are a couple names you might want to write down. Rustam and definitely Akbar Nurmagomedov as possible parlays. We'll talk more about that as we go down the card. But his line's been beat up so much. And with Sergey being, dangerous, I do lean Kabalov to take it. But Kondratko's no joke. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him. He has some nasty stand-up skills, and he is a little bit bigger than Rustam, so should be a good fight. Next up, Roman Kopylov, Carl Robertson. See, the thing about this fight, guys, is the line is accurate, 1.9 each, pick 'em fight. I do like Carl Robertson. It's first fight for Roman. Again, it's in Russia, though, so this could go to a decision, in my opinion. Roman looking to grapple. So I can't put a bet on it. I'm going to lean Carl Robertson just because I never really like to put too much stock into guys that I haven't seen anything from in the octagon. It's just a rule of thumb that I like to go by until they show me something in the cage. It's hard for me to put money behind them. But should be a good fight, and it won't be a bet for me, but I'll go Carl Robertson. I'm not even going to butcher it. Nurmagomedov and David Zawada. Zawada's got some power in his hands. He can definitely, he could catch him. But I like Nurmagomedov. I don't like his line, though, at 1.25. That's why, if you're going to do some parlays, that at this point is the only option for him. So maybe a name to look at. I do like him to win, most likely by decision. Possibly late, submission, ground and pound, just bad positioning. But I do like him to win, and a possible parlay option there to look at. Same with the next fight, guys. Roosevelt Roberts and Alexander Yokolev. Yokolev came in after a decent layoff. I think it was about 2 years, and had a good performance in his last fight. Got the finish. So, I was impressed by that. Roberts coming off a loss to Vince Pichel. He was actually doing really well in the early part of the fight. Kind of got caught up in the grappling and lost that fight. I really, I do feel that Roosevelt's going to have a bright future, going to be a problem in the lightweight division in the future. So I do like him here, but, look at the experience. We got, a lot more fights for Yokolev, a lot more experience in the cage. 35 fights, to 9 does say something. But I do like Roosevelt. So I will stick with that pick. Again, if he were to get up to 1.7 or 8, it'd be okay for a small straight bet. That would be my preference. If not, I guess you could put him in a 2-man parlay with one of the other big favorite parlay options. That's something to possibly look at there. One thing I do like to do, guys, when you're going to do like the 2-fighter parlays, it's kind of better to, maybe take a guy who's up at like 1.5 or one of the higher, better looking odds. And then with one of the, put with one of the 1.2s to get it to plus money. A lot of times you just want to get those 2-man parlays to the plus money, or even the 3-man parlays that are super big favorites, right? Just always try to get yourself close to that plus money. Next up, Jessica Rose Clark and Penny Kianzad. This one's hard for me to pick a winner, guys. I'm just going to say it's going to go to a decision because I'd be lying if I had a strong lean either way. If I had to pick, maybe Penny, but even then, there'd be no confidence in that pick. I do think a decision prop would be the best way to go. And then again, that might be going on the list, or it might be something to look at to put on the list with the other options for parlays. And then we got Gregory Popov and Davy Grant. Sorry. Earlier in the week, somebody had asked me about this fight, and the answer I gave is what I'm going to say here. It's big time on the decision for this. I think that this one will go to a decision, and it'll be a big sweat. I think it'll be a pretty close fight. So I do think Popov might pull it off at home, but there is value on Grant. It's just I have a hard time seeing him, or have a hard time, picturing them giving him a decision. I don't know why, but and with the likelihood that it goes to a decision, I just think that it'll go to Popov by decision. But I do feel if it was in Las Vegas and he was at 2.8 or whatever, I think that would be not a bad bet to go with Grant. I haven't seen a whole lot from Grigory that would, warrant, thinking that he should be that much of a favorite. Grant's been away for a while, though, so I think that probably comes into a factor. Or he might have just, had a recent return but been off for a while before that. It's never really good to bet on fighters that aren't active, and he's definitely not. So just going to stay away from that one pretty much, guys. So just to reiterate real quick what we picked or what we went with here on the UFC card. First off, of course, Calvin Kattar, went over that enough times. I do think the lines are way off on that. Volkov and Hardy, we're going to stay away. Danny Roberts, do think the line's a bit off there. There's a lot of factors playing into that fight. I wouldn't be mad if you take a shot. Me personally, I still haven't decided. I might do a last minute picks, but anybody who did, like I said, not mad at that. Ed Herman and Caddis. Again, these lines are right on. I'd like to see Ed win, but there's no value there. Rocco Martin and Amiv. I might take a shot on Martin. If he's up to 2.4 or 5, I would take a bet on that. Shamil and Klidson, another fight I'm going to stay away from. If Klidson got up to 3.0 or better, which could happen closer to fight time, I would take a shot on that. Dolce, this is probably one of the most most off lines. He's up over 4-1. Don't think that should be the case. So I'll probably take a small shot on him. Rustam Kabalov and Sergey Kandasco was a possible parlay option. Lines got beat up, so you might want to put Rustam down on the list of possible parlay. Robertson and Kopylov, lines are accurate. Magnomedov, possible parlay option to put on your list. Roosevelt Roberts. If you see him go up to a 1.7 or 8, that's a straight bet. If not, a possible parlay option. Female fight to go the distance, and Popov staying away from that. So now that we're up on 20 minutes for UFC, guys, I will do a separate video. I'll try to keep that one to around 10-15 minutes. We're just going to go over, like I said, the fights that are important on those cards, or the names that stood out, lines that are off, but we won't go through all of them. Now, I just want to say real quick before I wrap this up, last video I did mention, the analytics were saying about 50% of people had subscribed. And I do appreciate, since then, I did notice a lot of people had subscribed. So, we're getting closer to 100. I wanted to get there, before I hit a month, or by the time I hit a month. So there is still a few days left to do that. I just wanted to say, I'm never going to charge anybody for bets here. There's a lot of people out there who like to use their videos as a commercial for their websites and things like that. It's always going to be free. So, what you guys can do to repay me is subscribe. I want to get, a community going here. Diehard fans, along with guys that are just getting started with betting. Everybody can have input, and just make it a good spot to come before you place your bets, or to get, the information that you need. So I don't like to harp on it, or, mention it more than I have to, but if you could subscribe, I'd appreciate it, and get me to that 100. That'd be big. All right, guys, I'm going to make that video now. I'll put it out later. Hopefully you guys have a small list. I'll definitely add some names to it. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.